Hi first years, this is your fourth lesson on decimals and today we will be covering rounding. So we can use a number line to help us with rounding, especially when we want to round a decimal number to the nearest whole number. If we were looking specifically at 1.5, we know that because we have a 5 here right in the middle, we round up to the nearest whole number, which would be 2. But if we had anything lower than 1.5, so 1.25, 1.1, we're going to round to the whole number 1. So it's either going to stay the same, so 1.4 would round to 1, or it's going to round up if it's 5 or above. Okay, let's round these examples to the nearest whole number. So the number 45.6. Now, if we think of the fact that to the left of the decimal point, these are whole numbers, and to the right of the decimal point, these are just parts of a whole number. So we need to decide if 45.6 is closer to 45 or if it's closer to 46. So 45.6 is actually past that halfway line. It could be around about here. Okay? So that's actually closer to 46. Now let's have a look at the next example, 59.3. So 59 or 60 is what we need to decide. But 59.3 is actually a lot closer to 59. So we would keep this the same. 199.3. Well, we need to decide, is 199.3 closer to 199 or 200? So if this is halfway, 199.5, 199.3 is probably around about here. Okay, so it's obviously closer to 199. And lastly, 999.5. Well, we need to decide if this number is closer to 999 or if it's closer to 1,000. That would be the next whole number. So somewhere halfway is where our exact number is. 999.5 is right there in the middle. And we know from our last example on the previous page that anything above or equal to 5 rounds up. So this would actually round to 1,000. Okay. Now let's look at rounding to one decimal place next. So 45.63. We need to decide if that is closer to 45.6 or 45.7. Now 45.63 is less than 45.65. That would have been in the middle there. It's around about here. Okay, so to one decimal place, that would be closer to 45.6. In our next example, 59.39. To one decimal place, we need to decide if it's closer to 59.3 or 59.4. So we want there to just be one number after the decimal point if we're rounding to one decimal place. Now, 59.39, if this is halfway, 0.35, then that's actually pretty close to 59.4. Say it's around about here. So to one decimal place, that is definitely closer to 59.4. In the next example, to one decimal place, we want there to be one digit. So 199.3 and 199.4 is what I need to decide on. Where does this question, 199.366, lie? Now, since we have 199.366 here, that is actually past the halfway line. Now, I'm not going to get this exact at all, but if it's past your halfway line, you have to round up. Okay, so because this 6 was more than 5, we have to round this up to the next decimal number. So instead of 0.3, we end up at 0.4. And the last example here, 999.591. So we need to decide, is this number going to round to 999.5 or to 999.6? So we need to figure out where this would lie on the number line in between these two decimals that are already at one decimal place. So 0.591 is actually just over the 0.5 section. So we would round up. So say it's like just here. We would round this up. So that would be 999.6. Okay, so moving on to rounding to 2 decimal places. Now remember, at any point you can pause the video and try these yourself and then unpause to see if you got them correct. So 45.635 to 2 dp decimal places. Now this time, without a number line, I'm just going to underline the first 2 digits after the decimal point and then decide what the third digit is going to make me do. Now it's a 5. And I know that when I see a 5, I need to round up. So this 5 is going to bump the 3 up to a 4. So it would be 45.64. In the next example, we need to round to 2 decimal places, so I'm going to underline the first 2 after the decimal point. But the 3 is going to keep the 9 the same because it's less than 5. So the 9 can stay the same. So that would be 59.39 to 2 decimal places. 199.366. Let's underline the first 2 and then look at the third digit. It's a 6, which is 1 greater than a 5. So we need to round this 6 up to a 7. So 199.37 would be the answer. And in the last example, we have a 59, but a 1 after the 9. So the 9 can stay the same. 999.59 would be the final answer. Now remember, when you are writing this into your jotters, you can either use this as your heading, rounding to 2 decimal places, or if you are just writing the question and answer and rounding as your title, please write this at the end. 45.64 to 2 dp. Because we are about to move on to 3 dp. Oh, not yet though. So, moving on, rounding to 3 decimal places. So we have here 5.6358. So let's look at the first 3 after the decimal point. And then the fourth digit is an 8. We know that we have to round this 5 up because 8 is greater than 5. So this would give you 5.636 to 3 decimal places. In the next example, we have 9.3934. The 4 is going to allow the 3 to stay the same. So 9.393 to 3 decimal places. In the next example, we have 19.3667. So let's underline the first 3 and then look at the next number. It's a 7, which is greater than 5. So we need to round this 6 up to a 7. So we would get 19.367 to 3 decimal places. And lastly, we have 999.5599. So the fourth number is a 9. So that 9 is going to round this 9 up to a 10. But if that's rounded up to a 10, the 5 is going to round up to a 6. So let's write this all out. 999.56. Now the question wanted 3 decimal places, so I am going to have to add in a 0 here. And that is because the 9 bumped this 9 up to a 10, which bumped this 5 up to a 6, but I have to add in a 0 to make the answer to 3 decimal places. And I want to write that in to 3DP. Okay guys, it's your turn to try some questions. So can you please attempt pages 14, 15 and 16 on rounding to whole numbers 1, 2 and 3 decimal places. If you need any help, just ask. I am more than happy to help. Good luck and enjoy.